Hello, and welcome to a conversation with Columbus Realtors. I am Brent Swander, your Columbus Realtors CEO, and today I am joined by our 2025 President, Madam Buffie Patterson, and our 2025 Immediate Past President. I know you enjoy that title, Mr. Scott Hrabcak. So thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Buffie, why don't you kick us off? Tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are.
So Buffie Patterson, I am broker owner of Eden Regento Real Estate Consultants. I'm actually a two-time licensee. I got licensed the first time when I was 19, which was quite some time ago, and relicensed after a career in banking. I'm also the proud daughter of a broker, so I'm a second-generation broker as well.
Perfect. Scott?
I am Scott Hrabcak. I'm with Hannah Commercial Real Estate. I am their Senior Vice President of Commercial Real Estate here in Central Ohio. Been licensed since January of 1989, so a couple years, right? And, you know, frankly, like you said, you're immediate past president, which isn't a bad seat to be in.
And like Buffie, this is a family business for you too, right?
It is. Yeah, my brother Greg, who many of you know, was a past president here, and obviously with OAR was a past president, and NAR was a treasurer. So, and my father John really kind of started our brokerage back in the day in the 70s. So, yeah.
Perfect. So we have some familial relationships here in the business. So this is a very family-oriented business across the board. So, Buffie, why don't you just kick us off a little bit telling us what's happening in residential real estate in Central Ohio?
One of the great things about Central Ohio is that it's growing. And with that growth can sometimes come challenges. So one of the challenges that we have that is also positive is that we're seeing inventory rise. So year over year, for the month of August, inventory rose 25% in Central Ohio. And our numbers are actually higher than what we've seen since 2016. So it's positive because there's more opportunities for buyers. They have more choices, they've got more options, they can take their time when choosing a home. The challenge is that sellers may be a little impatient because they've had a couple of years where you put your house on the market and literally 3 days later, you're in contract. So we are seeing positives in terms of the growth within our area. We're seeing positives in terms of our inventory, and we're also seeing positives in terms of our sales.
So we have rising inventory, more inventory, but it's still a seller's market. Excuse me, it's still a seller's market. So how do you counsel clients and consumers through that?
So when working with buyers, one of the first things I do is a consultation. I spend about 45 minutes to an hour talking them through the steps of the process. And I kind of break that down into 6 steps. So first of all, we're going to identify a lender. Second, we're going to work together to identify homes. So what are you interested in? What do you like? I talk to them about the importance of communication, how showings are going to work, what to expect when we're negotiating a contract. We then talk about the inspection, the appraisal, underwriting, and then finally what to expect at the closing table. One of the things that I caution them about and also talk with them about is during that home search period, what to look for. So even though we do have increased inventory, we are still in the seller's market, as you mentioned. Seller's market is considered, or I should say a balanced market, is considered about 6 months of inventory. Currently in Central Ohio, we have 2 months of inventory. And so it is still considered a seller's market. There are homes that may take a little longer to sell, which gives buyers more choices and more options, but they've still got to make a decision, right? And then on the seller side, just making sure that sellers understand that although it is still a seller's market, you do need to prepare your home for sale. You do need to understand if there are potential defects in the home that you can address early so that you don't have a negotiation quandary when it comes to the inspection. You do need to price your home right. You don't want it to sit. And that you may still find yourself in a situation where there are multiple offers and there are multiple buyers who are interested in your home. So there's many, many more things. There's probably 200 things that we do on behalf of buyers and, 250 that we do on behalf of sellers. And so it's just really walking them through the process so that they know what to expect so that when things occur during the transaction, they're not surprised.
I want to come back to that about the 200 things that realtors do for buyers and or sellers. So we'll circle back to that. But Scott, why don't you give us the lay of the land of the commercial market? What's happening in your world?
So I think, depending upon the sector, right, whether it's industrial or it's office or it's retail, each one of them has some bright spots, but industrial is the easiest one to point at because it is obviously incredibly robust. We've got markets that are incredibly strong that really dot Central Ohio, and we can talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Office is finding its way a little bit. I mean, I think that post-pandemic, there are some bright spots, but there are also, some locations that are still going to be a little bit challenged, but they're doing their best to kind of find their legs. Retail, and if we talk about retail, I think you'd be very surprised to hear, frankly, with the amount of inventory that we have, that believe it or not, we are almost full. I mean, as much retail space as we have in this marketplace, it's truly incredible. But, Central Ohio has always been a pretty strong economy in times of challenge and or in times of, frankly, markets, doing well. So we're very, very blessed to be in Central Ohio is what I would say.
So you hit on industrial and retail. The New Albany Business Park is obviously growing.
Yeah.
That's an opportunity. That's a great thing, obviously.
Yeah.
But then you see some townships that are putting moratoriums on data centers.
Yeah.
So how do we balance, the good with the bad, and what's your outlook on Central Ohio?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the biggest challenge that if we go right to data centers, we talk about that for a couple of minutes. The biggest challenge that you have is utility, right? Infrastructure, and most people talk about electric, but the other side of the equation is water. Water is incredibly important in a data center because most of the systems are basically water cooled. So there are data centers that are coming to market that are using recycled systems, which are great. But the reality is the pressure on the infrastructure in the data center world is a huge challenge. And that's really one of the biggest reasons I think you're seeing some of these communities say, hey, wait a minute, we need to think about this.
Any thoughts on what's driving specifically industrial and retail? Why is that thriving here in Central Ohio?
So, I mean, I think the easiest one to point at, and most people, well, maybe not most people know, but the reality is we are a 10 to 12 hour drive from about 46% of the population in the country. So think about that for a minute. If you are in the logistics world, this is where you want to be, right? You can get your product to the end user and get it to them quickly, right? So, we've got 250 million square feet of industrial space in this Central Ohio market area, big number. Our vacancy factor, maybe 7%. Sounds like, probably a good spot to be in. And candidly, I would tell you with, let's say it's 17 to 19 million square feet of vacant space, that is the right spot to be in because you do need to be able to move when, obviously new logistics companies come in and need to find space. So on the industrial side, I would tell you, New Albany, obviously, it's a very large park and there's a lot going on there. But, when you look at Obats or you look at Rickenbacker or, some of the other intermodals, there's a lot going on there that move product in and around our communities and outside.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, too, from a diversification aspect of commercial real estate in the sectors that we have, whether it's defense now, logistics.
Sure.
I'm sure that's playing a role as well.
It is. Yeah, no question.
Office, and then I'll come back to you, Buffy. But let's talk office real quick. Are you seeing from an office market, obviously you mentioned COVID and coming back to work, the Class A or the new builds versus the legacy type buildings, is there a difference there?
There is, definitely. I think there is a bit of a flight to quality is what people call it, or what developers call it. I think there's this reality that, the back to work order, we'll call it. Is it really an order, or is it, hey, we want to get you in here, but we need to entice you to be here in some ways. So you see a lot of developers and companies building spaces that are creating environments where people want to be there, right? You want your people to be there. You want them to collaborate. You want them to grow. You want them to get better. And so you do see companies looking at space in that fashion. They're saying, hey, if we're going to do this, we need to make sure that the environments that we are in are going to help us grow and be better.
Yeah. Buffy, let's circle back. Let's talk a little bit about mortgage rates and the impact that mortgage rates are having on consumers right now.
Well, we are seeing some positive impact as mortgage rates have dropped over the last couple of months. When I looked Most recently, we were down to about 6.25%. And we've been hovering in the sevens, mid sevens for the past couple of years. And so there was actually a study that NAR did that indicated that if mortgage rates dropped, and at the time they were around 7%, if they just dropped a percentage point down to 6, in the Central Ohio area, there would be about 41,000 more families that would be able to afford to purchase a home.
That's a cool stat.
Of that 41,000, about 10% would actually go out and purchase.
Yeah.
And so what we could expect to see is that we'd have just a little over 4,000 more sales in Central Ohio. So that's a positive.
Yeah.
And we're at 6.25%, so we're certainly getting there. And I would imagine we've seen an increase in sales, about 5% year over year. I think we're going to continue to see an increase in sales with the drop of interest rates.
So you talked earlier, I said we'd circle back to this, the 200-ish items that a realtor helps either a buyer or a seller do. So, when I talk to our members, I talk about articulating the value to the client and that a client should know that you do more than put a lockbox on the door, and you do more than put a listing in the MLS, and on the buy side, you do more than let them in that door. Explain the value of a realtor and all the items that you all do on a daily basis to really set yourselves apart to the clients and what you do. Articulate your value.
If I were just to kind of boil it down, because there is a lot, we're advisors, we're advocates, we're going to negotiate on your behalf. And that's not just with the other party. If I'm representing the buyer, I'm not just negotiating with the seller or the seller's agent. If I'm representing the seller, I'm not just negotiating with the buyer or the buyer's agent. We are, out there and talking to home inspectors and understanding the details of the inspection so that when we've got to go and make an ask, we're making the right ask. We are hitting appraisers up to make sure that they understand how we arrived at the list price for this home and why it's important for the home to appraise for the price. I can show you 15 comps, right? We're also, though, negotiating when things come up. Everything doesn't always go as planned. And so we're talking. So we're representing and supporting our clients from point A to point B. There's the transaction, but then there's also the personal side of it. Typically, buying a home is the largest single purchase that a family will make. And in that, there's a lot of emotion. There can sometimes be angst. Certainly, there's a lot of joy, but it's stressful. It's actually one of the most stressful things that a person can do in their lifetime. Couple that with moving, which is also one of the most stressful things that a person can do in the lifetime. And so I tease, like when I do CE, and I'll say, like, we're butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers. Like, we're literally everything to our clients. They rely on us heavily to ensure that they get from point A to point Z in the transaction. One of the things I can talk to that I do, in addition to that consultation that I talked about earlier, I reach out when I'm representing a buyer or seller to the lender. So before I write a contract, I'm reaching out to my buyer's lender to make sure that I understand, have your time frames changed? Understanding how our lenders work and communicating that to the buyer. Yeah. On the seller side, I reach out to the lender to make sure that I understand their process, how often they're going to communicate. We are all things to our clients, and they just rely very heavily on us to help them.
So with that, one of the initiatives we've undertaken here at the association is Behind Every Move. We were very intentional about that campaign that we're launching. So it's not just behind every home move. It could be a retail or industrial move too. So talk about the launch of Behind Every Move and what that means for the association, our members, the consumer. Kind of put a bow on that for us.
Well, the Behind Every Move campaign is two parts to it, right? So there's reminding the realtor to understand, appreciate, and then to be able to communicate their value, to remind them of how important what they do every single day is to our communities. Everyone needs a place to live and work, right? And so with that, it's a reminder to realtors. But then also on the consumer side, it is a reminder of the role that we play every single day, fighting on their behalf to ensure that they have the right to own property and to use it in the way that they desire. And that whether or not they know our individual names, we are representing them and ensuring that they have the right to do what they want to do with their property.
Yep. Scott, what does behind every move mean to you on the commercial side?
It's interesting, as Buffy put it well. I think you are so many things to your client, right? You're more than just this encyclopedia of, terms and conditions and opportunities. You're trying to really help them. And I know on the commercial real estate side, I would look at it as, we are consultants. There's no question about that. Most of the companies that we work with and the clients that we work with, they're running a business. They don't have time to be out in the marketplace really looking for real estate. They hire us to help them find locations that help them grow their brand and get better at what they do. One of the things that I think Buffy, and I know she would agree, just getting a site in your crosshairs, right, in contract, whatever that might be, or a letter of intent on the commercial real estate side, that really just starts the process. Everybody thinks that when you find it, it's done, and it's not. That's where you really earn your stripes. That's where, every realtor that I do business with on the commercial side of the ledger, these folks are professionals. They understand the reality of what it's going to take to kind of get it across the finish line. And that process between just finding a site and actually getting the tenant or the buyer into their facility is really something that kind of brings it all home.
All right, Buffy, let's circle back to kind of the 200-ish things that you do. Tell us one of your most memorable. Obviously, you don't need to name your client. We'll keep clients confidentiality here. What's one of your more memorable?
The innocent.
Exactly. More memorable transactions.
So recently, this was actually last year, I was contacted by someone who was a colleague from another organization that I belong to. And a mutual friend connected us. She lives in California. Her father had passed away, and he owned a condo down in the southern part of the Columbus area. And she wasn't here, and she didn't know what to do. And so I went, I made arrangements. I went and looked at the condo. It had not been updated, since it was built. There were just some other challenges. He actually passed away in the unit. Right. And so there were just some things that needed to be addressed. And so I worked with her, and I told her what it would take to get this price. Right. She had people calling who were literally trying to buy her dad's condo for like $60,000. It was worth over $200,000 if fixed up, and he owned it outright. He paid cash for it years ago. And so, again, she's in California, I'm here. And so I basically detailed what would need to be done in order to increase the market value and to put some dollars into the pocket of her and her brother. And then I managed that renovation. We redid the entire property. And she was able to sell that property, for $220,000. And she felt good about it. And her dad was into music. And so one of the things I did is with the light fixtures in the home, the new light fixtures, they all had like a musical component. I wanted her to be proud of, what we did. I feel like we did it together, be proud of it. Yeah. But then also that there be something of her father that was left. And so it was just like, I love doing that.
Awesome.
I try to go above and beyond for each one of my clients. I want them to walk away knowing that it's not just a transaction to me.
What a heartfelt story. I mean, you obviously cared about that one.
Yeah,
that's a
start
goodie.
crying.
Yeah.
That's a goodie. That's a goodie.
Scott, what's a memorable one for you?
I'm going to make you cry, but I'm going to tell you a story. It's interesting. Being at it as long as we have, there's a lot, right? You can think back and, every year there's something, or maybe every month there's a project you might be working on and it just kind of strikes at you. But I think one that comes to mind for me, several years ago, I had a client of mine who had a kind of a catastrophic event at their building. They had a water line break in the middle of the winter. Got 120 employees in this facility. Wow. And ultimately, it shut down their operation because they had to shut off utility. They had to shut off, any form of heat, anything like that. So essentially, it shut their business down. They called me on a Friday, and they were in the process of trying to get product out of the building and just put it somewhere. So I reached out to a number of my colleagues and I said, listen, I need space and I need it quickly. So we found 4 different buildings that we were able to move product into just to secure it, just to keep it safe. And then we spent the better part of probably the first part of the following week finding a facility for them to basically go back to work to. And we had a very good relationship with the broker on the other side, which is in Central Ohio, and I'm going to kind of change gears for half a minute. We have such a cooperative market in the commercial real estate sector, and I would say also in the residential. Yes. And we are incredibly fortunate because that's not the case in every submarket or every city.
I don't think many realtors understand how lucky we have in Central Ohio. You talk to your colleagues outside.
Truly incredible. You pick up the phone and usually the person's going to answer the phone and they're going to say, hello, how are you? And then you kind of move into what you're doing. But we found a facility that we knew could work, but we only needed it until the other building was restored. And the owner of that building was very reluctant to do kind of a short-term transaction for somebody who really was just going to be there for a matter of maybe months. Ultimately, we were able to make it work, and I really tip my cap to the other broker because they were wonderful in working through the process. My client was absolutely thrilled. They were able to open up for business in a matter of maybe 2 weeks as opposed to maybe 2 months. And it saved them a fortune, right? Wow. And, when they went back to their to put a bow on the end of this, when they went back to their facility, which was almost a year actually after the damage was done, when they went back to the facility, they threw a big party as kind of because the building at that point was now being refreshed. And, they said, hey, can you come on over? And when I came in, they did this kind of a big cheer, and it was one of these things where it caught me off guard first. I'll tell you, I don't cry a lot, but I'm a softie. I looked at him and he looked at me and he just smiled and, gave me a high five and whatnot. It's one of those where if you can help somebody through a really tragic situation, how much fun is that? Yeah. Come on.
It's the best.
Does it get any better?
Yeah.
It doesn't. It just doesn't. So, yeah.
Well, typically I would say ladies first, but in this instance, I'm going to say we're going to save the best for last.
Ooh, bam.
So, Scott, Mr. Immediate Past President, now that you have a little more time on your hands from the association, what are you doing to stay busy? What are you doing to have fun? And tell us a little bit about what's going on in your life.
Yeah, that's a great question. First off, it's interesting when you walk in the building and you haven't been here for a minute, right? I mean, it's seeing some of the folks.
I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, right. It's kind of fun, but really, family first. I've always been a family first. We talked about that. It's always family first. Grandkids. Yep. We had our 3rd grandchild, so every opportunity we have to be with them, it's absolutely, we're all over it, right? It's so much fun. Travel a little bit. We're doing a little bit of travel, but really also. Your focus on your business has changed a little bit too, right? You're away from it for a minute, and now you kind of move your way back in, and maybe you move your way back in a little differently. Yeah. And I would tell you that's part of what I've done is I've moved my way back in a little bit differently. But family, friends, that's all incredibly important to me. So I try to do that as much as I can.
I don't think I've ever seen you smile as big.
Yeah, kids they're awesome. They're just
nice.
Awesome. Yeah.
Good. Buffy, what have you enjoyed most about your year so far? And let's just focus on that. Let's not think about in 2026 yet. Let's just stay focused on the present.
Well, I want to have that smile.
You will be all over it.
Yeah. With 3.5 more months, I'll have that smile. Yeah. So what have I enjoyed? Craig, who's on your team, is not going to believe this. But I am actually enjoying things like this, like what we're doing today, because it has pushed me outside of my comfort zone. I tend to be more introverted. And so, doing housing videos and being on the news and, just being more public facing and out front has actually, I feel like, been very good for me. I like a challenge. One of the reasons why I, pursued this role. And so I think that that's probably been the most surprising. It's been very rewarding because sometimes you think you can't do something and you actually can.
You can.
And so, like you, I'm a definite believer in family first. I've been, taking care of my parents. I just got a new puppy. So that's been very interesting. He's 14 weeks old right now.
If you ever run into
awesome.
Buffy and you want to see puppy pictures, she is more than happy to show you.
I have like 2.5 million puppy pictures. He has his own Instagram account and he posts every single day. But no, like
Do you want to give that Instagram account a shout out?
it is at Ramses. That's RAMSES the Roddy, ROTTIE. And that's on Instagram. He's awesome. He's a cutie patootie. But I mean, honestly, getting out, talking to our members, talking to leaders in the community, really understanding what is happening in Central Ohio and how it just impacts us overall. It's been great. Many of my clients, because I was in banking before this, so I was a banking executive. A lot of my clients early on were other banking executives who relocated either to other countries or other states. And so as they come back, because that's 20 years ago now, right? So as they're coming back into Central Ohio, they are amazed at like how much we've grown. I've got one actually from Atlanta. He moved to Atlanta. He was back here last week because he's got some properties here, and he was like, "I'm going to move back to Columbus." He lives in Atlanta.
That's awesome.
It says something. So
Yeah. No, we didn't even get into the community impact that you all have, that our members have in terms of giving back to all the organizations. And we didn't talk about really the growth. We could have spent a lot of time talking about the growth. You two are both Central Ohio natives. So any closing remarks, Scott?
There is a lot going on in our community. I'm a big believer in momentum, right? Momentum is either a positive or a negative. And when momentum is positive, it can be, frankly, something that just keeps rolling, right? And right now, I would say we're on the positive side of momentum, and our momentum is pushing us in some really interesting directions. But it's exciting. It's great to see. It's really great to see.
Good. Buffy?
I would just say, and this is to our fellow realtors out there, just, remember who we are out here working hard for every single day. Yeah. We are a collaborative community in Central Ohio, not just realtor to realtor, but really every aspect of what we do. It's why we are able to get so much done in Central Ohio, why we're number one in so many things. Our science center, our libraries, like we're number one. And I think that's because we do have that collaborative spirit. And so collaborate, ask questions, pick up the phone, talk, don't text. Continue to just build the community. And I think we'll continue to thrive.
Great. Well, thank you for joining the conversation with Columbus Realtors, and we look forward to seeing you next time.